Clavicular is an online streamer who focuses on mogging and looksmaxxing. However, he takes looksmaxxing far beyond something like exercising regularly to achieve a healthy body fat percentage or practicing standard skincare. In an interview with Jack Neal, which now has 466,000 views on YouTube alone, he explains how he is considering cosmetic limb lengthening surgery to go from 6'2" to 6'6", how he plans to get a double jaw surgery, and how he is, quote, pretty much using meth for hollow cheeks. Anyone who has followed gender medicine closely for the last couple of years will see the obvious parallels to the extreme body modification procedures sought by some members of the trans community. What such trans-identifying individuals and Clavicular have in common is that they each possess an extreme overvalued belief. GenSpect, an organization that claims to champion a healthy approach to sex and gender, recently released a statement urging the re-psychopathologization of transgender identification and the drive for medical transition. In it, they define an extreme overvalued belief as, quote, a rigid, non-delusional conviction shared and reinforced within a culture or subculture, defended with passion, and experienced by the individual as entirely rational. Over time, it strengthens, resists challenge, and can drive powerful, even harmful actions in its service, unquote. While I'm not sure I agree with including non-delusional in their definition, it generally provides a good description of the phenomenon. Obviously, the degree of overvaluation can vary depending on the procedure being sought and the zeal with which it is pursued. In Clavicular's case, much of his regimen and the surgeries he is planning or considering stem from his extreme overvalued beliefs regarding his appearance. This is similar to how interventions such as cross-sex hormones, mastectomies, and phalloplasties result from extreme overvalued beliefs among trans-identifying individuals. Obviously, Clavicular does not have an ideological belief that he is really a 6'6" soul trapped in a 6'2" body. But frankly, some trans-identifying people getting mastectomies and phalloplasties probably don't believe they have a male soul in a female body, but they both share an extreme overvalued belief that the benefits of such drastic body modification procedures outweigh the risks, and both their beliefs satisfy the rest of the definition provided by GenSpect. One of the reasons that GenSpect's re-psychopathologization campaign is so important is that the earlier de-psychopathologization movement urged by WPATH in 2010 made it possible for trans identities and the procedures that followed to be celebrated in media and popular culture as a positive, non-pathological expression of someone's true self. Since then, there has been a surge in children and adolescents identifying as trans and developing the extreme overvalued beliefs that they saw being celebrated on television, social media, and by popular brands. The lesson we should have learned since 2010 is that treating extreme overvalued beliefs as non-pathological and non-negative can cause serious harm to vulnerable children, adolescents, and adults. A decade and a half later, some seem intent on repeating this same mistake with another extreme overvalued belief: looksmaxxing. Here, and for the rest of this article, when I say looksmaxxing, I do not mean exercising consistently, getting a nice haircut, and dressing more fashionably. Rather, I will be referring to extreme practices such as ingesting crystal meth, pursuing limb lengthening surgeries, and bone smashing. Clavicular, who seems to be the most prominent looksmaxxer on the internet, claims to be making between $80,000 and $100,000 a month from streaming through a combination of donations and the Kick Creator Incentive Program. While I'm not calling for him to be deplatformed, I am arguing that those supporting him through donations have a moral obligation to stop, just like those donating to creators expressing support for gender reassignment surgeries have a moral obligation to stop. Creators and podcasters should also refrain from promoting Clavicular or allowing him to detail his regimen without significant pushback highlighting the dangers, ideally from someone with clinical or medical expertise. Children and adolescents are already vulnerable to self-image issues, particularly during puberty, and giving someone like Clavicular an unchallenged platform risks influencing them to imitate his extreme behavior. Creators who ignore or downplay this risk in an effort to garner clicks do so at the expense of children's well-being. And yes, cosmetic limb lengthening surgeries, taking crystal meth, and hitting yourself in the face, also known as bone smashing, are all harmful and should not be promoted to anyone, let alone children and adolescents, who I suspect make up a large share of those seeing Clavicular's content. Much like I imagine some proponents of gender medicine will eventually look back at what they have done in horror, so I too expect that Clavicular will eventually look back at what he has implicitly promoted to children and adolescents with great regret. Then again, that assumes that he lives to 40, which given his drug use could be somewhat questionable. I haven't listened to enough of his content to know whether he recommends that others follow in his footsteps, but frankly, it doesn't make much of a difference whether he explicitly recommends his regimen or advises against it. After all, simply by speaking about his regimen repeatedly, injecting someone who is allegedly a minor with a substance on camera, and streaming himself while admittedly on drugs, he is clearly acting as a harmful influence on the world and particularly America's youth. Those collaborating with him would do well to consider whether there is a line past which they are unwilling to give someone access to their audience, since if Clavicular has not crossed that line, it is hard to imagine that one exists at all. Postscript. I expect that some people will object to me even writing this article since they fear that it could draw eyes to Clavicular's content. I've considered this, but suspect that my audience has enough wisdom to see the obvious folly in Clavicular's antics. I also want parents to be aware that this is something they need to watch out for in their children and adolescents, particularly their teenage boys. Furthermore, Clavicular is so popular online that I imagine anyone younger than me who is seeing this video has already heard of him, so I doubt I am introducing him to impressionable adolescents. And even if I am, I'm clearly doing so in an unapologetically disapproving manner. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting my channel by shopping my merch or supporting me directly through my website, which should be linked in the description. You can also follow me on social media and subscribe on podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts to stay updated with new content.